JP has already introduced me as the Executive Director of INERELA. INERELA was launched as an African network. It was started by 8 religious leaders who were openly living with HIV. JP and I were also in the midst of that 8. It was launched in 2002 as INERELA. And the vision in 2002 was to strive for 0 stigma, HIV-related stigma, 0 new infections, and 0 AIDS-related deaths. And later, this vision was adopted by UNAIDS, the 3 zeros, as you know. Our primary beneficiaries, it's religious leaders. So all the work that we do, we train religious leaders and expose them to legal frameworks, to policies, to new research, and expect them to go back to their communities or their churches and develop congregational responses. So, for instance, with our SRHR, Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights program, we train religious leaders on all the aspects of SRHR, and then we expect them to develop their own responses, which they can take back home to empower those who are directly affected or the inadequately served persons, the ISPs. Our approach is training religious leaders to become agents of change. So most members of INERELA are living with HIV or they are directly affected by HIV and AIDS. The directly affected people is people who have either lost or are still nursing a spouse, a parent, or a very close relative. We know that in Africa, there are whole villages that have been wiped out by AIDS. So there are very few people in Africa who can say we are not affected at all. And I hope it will be the same here, because I know that there are a few people who are living with HIV in Sweden. We have 20 networks in Africa, in different countries, and we have 5 regional networks. And INERELA Europe is actually based here in Uppsala. And then we have INERELA Asia Pacific, we have INERELA Latin America, North America, and a presence in Canada and the Caribbean. So that's 5 regional offices outside of Africa where our work started. In our training of religious leaders as well, we encourage them to integrate their responses to their Bible studies, to their sermons, to their, in their mosques, in their temples. INERELA is interfaith. So we work with all faith communities, Buddhism, Hinduism, Sikhism, Islam, and so forth. The majority of the members of the network are still Christian, but we do have quite a few from the other religious communities as well. A few years ago, INERELA developed a prevention strategy known as SAVE, S-A-V-E, and the S stands for safer practices. The A stands for access to medication and nutrition. The V stands for VCT, and E stands for empowerment. This was in response to ABC, which was not working at all, especially for women in Africa who did not have the power to choose any mode of prevention or even negotiate for safer sex. So the SAVE includes the ABC, but it's more comprehensive. A toolkit was developed, and this toolkit has been used to train religious leaders. The toolkit has modules on different issues, including SRHR, CSE&I, female genital mutilation, condoms, what is a condom, how does it work? So it has a number of modules. So for those religious leaders who do not have time to train people for days, they can just pull out one module and focus on a specific issue, depending on what they are responding to. So our programs today are not only responding to HIV directly, They are also responding to the structural injustices that make people vulnerable to HIV and AIDS. And that is why sexuality is right in the core of our work, because the most common mode of transmission in most countries is sex and sexual activity, whether it's homosexual or heterosexual. So our programs are, we have a human dignity and gender justice program. The human dignity approach was an approach that we developed when we realized that religious leaders were very suspicious to the human rights agenda. It was perceived to be something that was imposed by the West. Therefore, we developed a human dignity approach. We also have an SRHR program, as I've already said, CSE&I, which focuses mostly on school children and out-of-school youth. So when we train religious leaders, they have the responsibility of going back to their own communities. For instance, in the Roman Catholic Church, they have to train their catechists. And when they go to other churches, they have to train their Sunday school teachers. And when they go to the Muslim communities, this is integrated into the madrasa curriculum. So this is the approach that is taken for all the issues that we have. We have also developed theological manuals on issues like SRHR. We have a handbook that was published end of last year, and we are in the process of rolling it out with the hope that when we get more feedback, it will be revised and we will add more issues. We also focus as the Secretariat is based in Johannesburg in South Africa. We focus on organizational development of the different networks. So if the network in Nigeria has a challenge with maybe human resources, a challenge with funding for a specific program, we also respond to those needs. In INERELA Europe, when they say, can we learn from Africa? Are there any specific countries that we can visit? These issues are sent to the Secretariat, and then we respond to them. So in our organizational development program, it includes issues like governance, the mobilization of resources, monitoring and evaluation, and also communication systems. You must know it's very complex when you work with partners all over the world. HIV is still an important part of our work, so we still do a lot of SAVE training, but it also includes advocacy campaigns on issues like early marriage, which makes young women vulnerable to HIV and AIDS. And we also conduct or facilitate theological dialogues, and we also promote HIV counseling and testing campaigns, especially for men. Even though we've had HIV for a very long time, men are still reluctant to be tested on time. So they tend to be late presenters, and we are still losing a lot of men because they don't get tested early enough. So basically, that is who INERELA is. We're doing exciting work. We respond to different countries in different ways, so the context informs how the program will be developed in each country. For instance, when we work in Francophone countries, we have made sure that the SELF toolkit is translated into all the languages that people use in the different networks. It has been translated into Portuguese, into Spanish, into French, into Filipino language, Mandarin, and so forth. I don't even know about the others, but I believe they are all...
It's even in Swedish.
Exactly, even in Swedish. So that's INERELA for you. I'm not sure whether there are any questions.